Welcome to Spotlight on Schools. We focus on the Rochester City Schools. I'm your host, Jim Strauss. In an article in the February 27th issue of the Democrat and Chronicle, education writer Justin Murphy reported that 20 Rochester schools were downgraded by the New York State Education Department in its most recent release of school and district ratings. Last year, there were 14 priority schools, which is the lowest rating. This year, that number is 26. Deputy superintendents pointed to progress on attendance, early literacy, and community partnerships as reasons for hope, but then added that, quote, "We need to sharpen our focus on providing students the instruction and support they need," end of quote. It's a belief of my guest today that the Rochester City School District, by the very nature of its structure, may be unable to provide these things. I'm happy to welcome back to Spotlight John Bliss. John is a longtime educator, both in the public and charter realm. John is the founder of the Urban Choice Charter School, and he's currently a 6th grade teacher in a Rochester public school. Welcome back to Spotlight on Schools, John.
Thank you very much.
Okay, this is John's 4th visit to Spotlight on Schools. You can view earlier episodes on our new YouTube channel called Spotlight on Schools. Also, our website, which is spotlightonschoolsblog.wordpress.com. In the episode labeled John Bliss, Education Activist Part 3, recorded last April, John presents a model for a new school that will work in urban areas, beginning with a 3-tiered model for instruction that begins with a consideration of a child's physical and emotional needs. He also examines what the district must do and what school staff must do. In the episode labeled John Bliss, Education Activist Part 2, recorded last March, John discusses at length what a child needs in order to be resilient in a difficult environment. His basic premise is that the cures for most kids are going to come from the people closest to them, the teachers and staff in individual schools. He calls for more autonomy in buildings. He points out that the most successful schools in Rochester, for example, the School of Inquiry, School of the Arts, the Children's School, and Early College School, have several elements in common. 1, strong leadership, strong parent groups, smaller size, a focus on reading and writing, and better relationships among staff. He presents approaches to remedy what he sees as a dysfunctional hierarchy at the district level. Now, just yesterday, we're taping on March 7th and March 6th in a guest essay in the Democrat and Chronicle entitled Create Path for Change. John laid out the problem and the solution. I'm going to read it as soon as I find it. There are essential principles and values that must be understood and applied to improving the Rochester City School District before any real progress is made. I believe that the core values needed to form the foundation for change for Rochester City Schools are no different than those used to determine whether a home or neighborhood will remain valuable, a business remains viable, or a child grows up to be a good citizen. Expectations, a sense of ownership, and accountability can be applied to all of the above in similar ways. And, like schools, if any of these are severely lacking, the likelihood for failure increases dramatically. This is not a new concept. Unfortunately, fixing any of these often involves seeing them from an outside perspective. When someone or a group of people are accustomed to certain conditions over time, they begin to see these conditions as normal, acceptable. It's no surprise that different parents, business owners, or homeowners have their own expectations based on the long-standing conditions. They accept these or fight to make things better based on what they know is possible. Unfortunately, this is why change in the Rochester City School District has been so pitifully slow to improve. The parents, staff, community, politicians, and others have been around a low-performing district for so long that they really do not even know what is possible. Of course, there are areas of quality and great things happening in places, but as a whole, failure has become the norm. And as a result, expectations are ridiculously low. So how do we change this? The only way to improve many city schools is to start from scratch. Independent outsiders need to create a viable, sustainable path that tells everyone how to improve city schools from the ground up. This does not mean dismantling the district. What is needed is a path that encourages and embraces the takeover of individual schools by groups that will bring with them ownership, high expectations, and accountability. This path can't be developed by people within the district. It must be done by people who will not be influenced by educational politics and who have a much higher ceiling. Unfortunately, no one is going to go down that road until the leaders clear the path. It can be done. A sentence that stands out to me, John, is the following one. Quote, when someone or a group of people are accustomed to certain conditions over time, they begin to see these conditions as normal, as acceptable. What conditions are you referring to?
Well, it's interesting because when I wrote that, I view conditions being conditions that we run into all the time. Obviously, I'm speaking specifically about schools, but I think the two of us or anyone else, you get accustomed to people that drive in Los Angeles are different conditions in terms of what is a traffic jam in Los Angeles is very different than what it would be in Rochester. So the point that I was trying to make was the conditions in many of the city schools have been so poor. And when you work under those conditions time and time again, you become accustomed to those conditions. You begin to accept them. You begin to realize, you begin to believe that these are normal conditions. I mean, a classic example is the preparation that teachers and administrators have before school starts. And the amount of time that they're given before school starts to prepare for a school year is ridiculous. In most cases, it's a day before the kids arrive. And that's been like that for many, many years. So you could ask anyone, is a day, is 6 hours enough time? Would it be enough time to prepare a person that owned a car wash for him or her to show the people that work in the car wash how to do? Probably not. And yet we give that same amount of time, 6 hours, in many cases that's the max, to a team of people who are going to be in charge of essentially raising all these kids for a year. Mm-hmm. So I would argue, I mean, that's just one example, there are hundreds, that those conditions, those faulty conditions, have become accepted because that's all we've known for so many years.
Mm-hmm. I have a list of things that you identified. You made a long list. It was almost in diary form. I teased out some of the things where you talk about insufficient preparation. Now, this was your first year at this school, correct?
Yes.
And so, especially to a new teacher, this is really important. The list of things that you didn't know how to do, that you weren't even introduced to, is very long. I have about 20 things here.
Right.
And that when they came up in the never-ending stream of emails that you got every day saying this has to be done today,
correct,
you didn't know what it was.
Correct.
You talked about a folder that was probably this thick of things that you had to do without the time to read it. That's scary.
I have no doubt that other schools, I'm not the only one and we're not the only school to go, but a classic example is the phone and trying to operate the phone. Now at Urban Choice, the school that I was previously at and ran, we set up the phones for the teachers. The conditions were set up for the teachers. So the teachers in that particular school were accustomed to different conditions. Teachers didn't have to go through and try to figure out how to program their phone or set up their answering machines. It was done for them. It's one of many, many things that didn't make sense to me and still doesn't make sense to me.
You sent me a list of observations, as I mentioned, and they seem to break down into a number of areas, and I've listed them here. The first one you talked about. The second one, top-down district policies and procedures, a rigid curriculum, testing and scheduling policies, a mountain of forms and other administrivia that bog teachers and students down, and their parents, I could add. Unending interruptions to the instructional day, kids falling through the cracks, on-site, inconsistent, and I'm quoting you, on-site, inconsistent, confusing, or damaging policies and procedures that occur at the building level. Which ones do you want to talk about?
Well, my generic answer is it's incredible how many things happen that simply don't make any sense. And you shake your head and go, why? I'm going to come back to the essay that I wrote. You become accustomed to those conditions. Why are we doing the things that we're doing in the way that we're doing them? I'll give you an example. So we know that kids, physical health is good for the kids. We know that kids need exercise. We know that running around is good for the brain. So why do we only give kids 70 minutes a week of gym or PE time or outside time? It doesn't make. Why do we restrict that at all? Why wouldn't we give the teacher the autonomy to say, you know your kids best. If they need to go outside or whatever they need to do to clear their mind so they're going to learn more, you can do that. Well, the reason why we don't do it is because the district, the bureaucracy instills fear in most teachers, and you don't step beyond those bounds.
Now, let me ask you this. Does bureaucracy, does it originate from the building or from the district?
Well, it's clearly from the district.
Okay.
I mean, and again, that's a great point. And I would respond by saying it's not just the teachers who are infected or affected by this. The principals are in the same boat. I mean, there's no question that if you're a principal and you've been a principal for 10 or 12 years or however long in the school district, and you're used to a certain form of communication, which often comes with it, certain expectations, be they good or bad, you're going to adapt to those. And I would argue in many cases, those expectations are coming from up here, and they have really very little understanding of what the realities are in the classroom.
Okay.
I mean, it is hard to imagine what a mess it is. It really is.
All right, let's talk about policies or procedures at the building level. One of the first things you mentioned was it appears to be no hallway pass procedure. The weekly parent newsletters that seem to be, you called it a joke in a couple of places because they end up being generic. You talked about schedules constantly changing. You talked about a curriculum. Hard to find the pacing charts, first of all. Then how do the pacing charts relate to daily instruction? They're scripted word by word, minute by minute. And you said the modules themselves, the groups of instruction used, were ridiculous.
Well, there's two. So again, because I'm gonna get on the table in a minute. So I'll make 2 points. One being what seemingly may be insignificant, and the other one which is large that you just mentioned. One is the hallway pass, and again, I'm sure this is the case in other schools, and I'm going to go back to the district and how it runs itself. Why in the world would teachers be required or be asked to create their own hallway passes? Now, we have both passes that we create, and we also have the little white passes. The little white passes you have to fill out every time a kid goes somewhere, and there's no doubt that teachers don't bother filling those out, either A, because they don't have the passes, or B, every time a kid needs to go to the bathroom or go somewhere you have to fill out a pass, it takes too long. Why would a district that's been around for however long it's been not have, and for what reason would you not have the same passes, the same look, in every school in the district? So when you have to go to the bathroom, whether you're this school or a high school or a middle school, this is the pass that you use to go to the bathroom. We don't want our teachers filling out paperwork. Here's the pass that you use. And by the way, then kids who go from school to school will know what the bathroom pass looks like. So when they go to a new school, they don't have to ask Mrs. Smith, oh, what do you use for a bathroom? So that's a small one.
Mm-hmm. Now, before we go into curriculum, because we're on this side of a break, you also mentioned that at one point you had to take all your guys to all your people to the bathroom at the same time because there were some irregularities. Quickly, John.
Again, now I've been in another school where they did that. When the kids mess around in the bathrooms, to cure that or to fix that, the easy fix for administrators is often you're going to have all your kids line up in the hallway and go to the bathroom 1 or 2 or 3 at a time.
And how long does that take?
Whether it takes 10 or 12 or 15 minutes, it takes a heck of a lot longer than it would if we were sending kids one at a time when they really needed to go.
Yep.
It's crazy.
All right. Let's take time out. We'll come back, talk with John Bliss. Be right back. Welcome back to Spotlight on Schools. We're talking with John Bliss, longtime educator, both in the public and charter realm. We've been talking about how the district is ineffective and doesn't understand what needs to be done. Right before the break, we were going to talk about curriculum and the problems with implementing a good curriculum.
So a huge part of the instruction is the curriculum. I was told, now this goes back to last year, that there was a curriculum called New York Engage, the Common Core curriculum, that's kind of followed like it's the Bible. Now, let me start by saying there's units or segments within that curriculum where everything is spelled out exactly like you're supposed to say it. And there's elements of that, there's units in that
word for word, right?
word for word, second to second, much more scripted than what we're doing here today. There's units in that math curriculum that are 1,000 pages long for a unit. Then as I got through the year, teachers and others began to tell me, well, we really don't have to follow it. We can use it as more of a guide. So this thing that I thought was once a script is now kind of a guide. Now keep in mind from school to school, this varies. Some schools use it more than others. The other thing relative to the curriculum is textbooks. How do we use textbooks? Do we not use textbooks? Do we use textbooks with this curriculum? Because the curriculum's all online and you have to print it. So keep in mind, you either got to find a way to view it online or you have to print it. And so we have hundreds of teachers printing curriculum that is hundreds of thousands of pages long. And then we're told that we don't have to follow it by script. So do we use books? Do we use manipulatives? Do we use computers? I'm not arguing that teachers should be told specifically what to use in terms of curriculum. But goodness, if you got to provide a little more direction than to say, well, we're going to use this 1,000-page scripted, form, or we're going to use a book. Or I mean, you got to give more direction to that than that. That doesn't make any sense at all. Curriculum is in part what drives instruction. There should be more clarity about things like that.
And has these modules, have they been working? Well, apparently not if you judge by our test scores.
Correct. And there's been pushback. There's been people on the boards that have said they're too scripted. New York Engaged, now there's been pushback, as there's been pushback on the tests as well, which are very, very closely aligned. Well, if you're on the front lines as a teacher, what are you supposed to do? This is a significant part of what I do every day.
Has your building principal leadership given you guidance in those areas?
I think as much as she can. Again, I personally think a lot of our principal, but I think she's working under the same strenuous conditions as the rest of us are, and the same confusing conditions that the rest of us are.
Well, you have an instructional coach. What does that person do?
Well, I think it's an instructional coach, and I think the person was hot. I think we met the person the first day that we got together as staff. So
and your principal didn't know this person, right?
I don't think the principal had just been introduced to the instructional coach, which I would think in a normal situation, the principal maybe should have hired the instructional coach because the principal is ahead of instruction, but at the very least, there should have been some formal introduction of the instructional coach and then what the person's role was.
Yeah, what the role is.
Well, it's it goes back to my point. You become accustomed to the conditions that you're surrounded by. And when chaos or near chaos is the norm, you lower your standards.
Can I add another one in here? You talked at several places about a parent liaison, which is an important concept, but your parent liaison works in the lunchroom.
I think, again, I'm not even sure, honestly, I'm not even sure if we have a parent liaison. I'm pretty sure we have a parent.
You probably do. That's my guess. Howard Eagle was in here in this program talking about the same thing. A parent liaison whose job is, and Howard's very big on getting parent involvement in.
Right.
And he was appalled to see this parent liaison working in the lunchroom.
Right. Oh, so he confirmed that some of them do.
Yes.
Well, again, I think that ours does. Now, a couple things. First of all, a little degrading, number one. And number two is it's not comical. In fact, it's pretty sad that I can look in your eyes and tell you I'm not even sure if the person is our parent liaison. Because you would think that a parent liaison would be having communication with some of my parents, seeking out to connect with some of my parents. And that hasn't happened. And by the way, the person's a wonderful person, but I don't really know what her role is.
It's not clear. The second thing you mentioned during the break was that you wanted to talk about acceptable chaos.
You ever been to Chuck E. Cheese?
Yes.
Okay. There are people that go to Chuck E. Cheese and consider that to be normal, that would be a normal environment. And that would be a normal environment for a 3 or 5 or 7-year-old and their parents bringing them there. Would not be a normal environment if you're going to take a date out. You probably would bring them to Chuck E. Cheese. The district, often the environment feels like you're in Chuck E. Cheese. Not conducive to intellectual stimulation.
We had talked about the discipline policy. You say it should be firm, swift, and consistent. You're saying it's not.
the discipline, why is there not and again, I believe in flexibility, I believe in autonomy, but why would the district not give every principal, every person that works in a school, here, a 1-page, 5, 6, 10 bullets, here are the things that are acceptable and not acceptable. Classic example, cell phones. I guarantee cell phones, the use of cell phones varies from school to school, from class to class. That makes no sense. Any single kid that attends a city school district school either should be allowed to have a cell phone, should not, or there should be some in between. But it shouldn't be up to the people working on the front lines to determine what that rule is.
That raises the question in my head about the new code of conduct and how well it's being implemented.
Oh my,
Oops.
I won't even. The new one that was supposed to be more fair.
Restorative justice model.
All right, we could talk about restorative justice at another time, but
Okay.
I'll tell you because I know a little bit about it. Restorative justice, and you called it a program. That's the problem. It's not a program. It's a philosophy. Restorative justice is about being honest with people. It runs through the entire school. So here we go again. The district is taking it as if it's an add-on, a big add-on, and trying to implement it piecemeal into the schools. Restorative justice leaders across the country will tell you it doesn't work unless it flows. It's a philosophical approach, and you need buy-in at all levels or it doesn't work. It's going to be a mess.
You need more social workers. One of the things you talked about several times here is social work and another support staff. And you talked about the manure principle. You spread it very thin across the district.
You know,
Is that part of the chaos?
Well, listen, no one. I said this many years ago. No one wants to get knee deep in you know what. And that's what it takes. Good gardeners. You got to get in there, and it's going to stink, and your hands are going to get dirty. No one wants to do that. It's better to use what I call the crop duster approach, where you fly above in a plane and you spread stuff from 1,000 feet, thinking that's going to, if we're lucky, we're going to get some seedlings that come up. It doesn't work. It's just ridiculous.
All right. Let's talk about the gardener approach. The teachers are the gardeners.
Absolutely.
They should be. They should be honored for what they do. They need to have fewer interruptions. They need to have fewer burdens of paperwork and administrivia.
Correct.
What you're seeing is what you've described to me in this journal of sorts that you've given me is that the teachers are not respected. It's top down. They are told what to do, and they're not asked for input. Does that sound right?
They're the roadies, and they should be the rock stars.
Ah,
That's
I
right.
like that.
That's right. That's right. They're the ones getting on stage. So why are they messing around with the lights? Why are they picking up the suitcases and the luggage and everything else? Let them do their show, support them, because success or failure is going to depend on how well they perform. Absolutely.
We're at 5 minutes left. So there were a couple of questions we wanted to get to before we ended.
Okay.
Your solution is to start from scratch at building levels, recruiting independent outsiders. Where have you seen this type of approach successful?
Well, I think that you can do it if you have some district people involved. I don't want to say that you shouldn't have district people involved, but the pilot schools in Boston, you need to take business people that are not Rochester City School District employees and therefore married to the way things work. You need to get them in the room, very articulate, very smart, very committed people. Small group, maybe 5, 6, maybe it's 8 people. You certainly don't want to what they're doing with the poverty initiative and have 130 people involved, because that doesn't work either. They need to sit in a room and they need to create a path for which those people who are capable of starting new models can follow to start these new models.
Okay. Well, would you see something like East High as fitting into what you hope would work down the road?
I think East High is an example that we should all be looking at. Now, keep in mind, the U of R is involved with East High. So you have a very powerful group that kind of walk down a particular path. And I don't know what that is. I mean, a point I would make is, what is that path? And why is it not public? Why are we not being transparent about this? In other words, how did East High get approved? What steps did they have to take? Can other groups follow through the same path as East High is following? Will other groups get $10 million like the U of R did? I mean, there's a lot of stuff is secretive that the district does, and it doesn't make sense to me.
Well, on the surface, what appeared to happen is that they were recruited. They were asked by
That's
our
correct.
previous superintendent. He reached out for help, which was one of his hallmarks of
Right.
he was asking for a lot of people for help, and U of R responded.
Right.
Which leads me to the next question. you said no one is going to go down that road until leaders clear the path. Who are these leaders and how can they clear the path? You've begun to answer that. But
Well, the key people, mayor, union leaders, school board, superintendent. It's not a big group of people. Say 8 people need to sit in a room, and then they need to reach out to these people who are going to who are going to develop the path, the road that people are going to take to start these new school units or pilot schools or school within a schools, or call them whatever you want to call them. But no one is going to get involved with fixing the district until there is a very public, open, and in a very embraceful way, you have these current educational leaders saying, we want this to happen, we're going to support it, and we're out there letting you know that we want it to happen.
so are we talking about educational institutions? Are we talking about something like Wegmans? Are we talking?
It could absolutely be Wegmans. It could be a dance studio. I mean, they talked about wanting another soda. Okay, perfect example. They want a military academy. There's talk about doing a military academy. How does that become? How do you open that military academy? It's easy to say we're going to have a model that's a military academy. Where's it going to be? How's it going to get funded? Is payroll downtown going to do it? Are they going to use human resources from downtown? What services are they going to use from central?
Or the county as well?
All
Social
those
services.
questions need to be answered. And whether it's a group that wants to do a military academy or a group that wants to do a media school.
Or about that harbor initiative that was
The
talked
river
about.
school,
Yep.
absolutely. Any of those. What is the road that these different groups need to go down to get approved to be one of these new models? No one is going to get involved to start a new model unless they know how to get to the other side of the woods. You got to clear it, because right now there's a bunch of trees and no one's going to do this. Not going to happen. It's too dark.
So the pressure needs to be on the mayor, who has a bully pulpit. She's a very active mayor, as far as I can see in education, but the school board and whoever the superintendent is, who I think will listen to the school board more than the last one. We have 30 seconds left.
Listen, that's the group. But why is Bob Duffy could be involved? You have business leaders that have been the university college presidents could be involved. This is 30,000 kids and their families who have really been in tough shape. There should be, the governor shouldn't be involved with this for all I care. I mean, we need to step it up big time.
Okay, we've run out of time, John. How can people contact you if they want to continue this discussion?
The public school Bliss email works.
Okay.
If you can show that's the best way to contact me is via the email.
Okay.
And it's publicschoolbliss.com.
Okay.
Yep.
All right, we've been talking with education activist John Bliss. You can check out John's earlier Spotlight episodes as well as other programs in this series by going to our YouTube channel at Spotlight on Schools or our website at spotlightonschoolsblog.wordpress.com. Thank you for watching. See you next time. Good night. Let's take time out. We'll come back, talk with John Bliss. Be right back.